Let's call to order the meeting of the Ellettsville Plan Commission for September 1st, 2022. Pat, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Denise, roll call, please.
David Drew,
Here.
Dan Swafford,
here.
Carrie Baker, Albert, Sandra Howe. Here. Pamela Sample. Here. Pat Wazalowski.
Here.
Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for April 7th, 2022 and August 4th, 2022.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for April the 7th, 2022 and August the 4th, 2022.
Second.
And I'd like to compliment Denise on concise minutes. They're easy to read and get the job done, so thank you. I wish I had your talent.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I don't believe we're going to have a monthly conflict of interest statement here. There is no old business. New business is a presentation by Envision Ellettsville. And who would like to start?
Good evening. My name is Krista Curtis. I am an Ellettsville resident. I am an employee of Cook Medical. I am a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and I'm the volunteer co-chair of Envision Ellettsville. And so what we thought we would do tonight in terms of flow and agenda here is that I'm going to open us up with just some short comments. My co-chair, Lisa Cisco, is also going to join in with a few comments. We're going to kind of set the stage. And then Ron Taylor is going to just give you a short presentation and overview of Envision Ellettsville. And then we're hoping to get through all that, I think, in like 25 minutes so that we can have plenty of time to answer any questions you have for us. Does that sound like a okay plan?
Sounds great.
Okay. So I was thinking about how to start the conversation, and I think maybe the place to begin was actually right in this room. In 2019, I don't know if any of you attended, but there was we called it a town hall meeting, and the room was packed full of people. And we had a panel with some speakers, and I think BEDC and Chamber and a few groups put the meeting together. And it was a discussion around our community and the future of our community, because we all knew there's a lot of interest in Ellettsville. There are people, as you well know, knocking on our door and looking at Ellettsville as a place for new business or housing. And so there was a discussion about the future of our community. And at the risk of sounding corny, I kind of felt like the room was a little bit electric. Like there was just a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy, that people were excited about the future and some of the things that were happening, all the good work that had been done over the past few years to do things like the infrastructure improvements that had been done. And out of that meeting, there really was a discussion around how do we capture that enthusiasm and that interest in the future of our community. And so that's really how Envision Ellettsville was born. It was initiated by the Chamber. We quickly joined arms with Ellettsville Main Street. Mike Farmer, who's the town manager, attends as an ex officio member. He attends all the Chamber board meetings, so he was there right from the beginning with us. And the idea of Envision Ellettsville was really to get collaboration among the different organizations that exist in our community that help make this community what it is. So business and residents and the school system and government and non-for-profit organizations. And what we wanted to do was get those groups talking so that we all had a plan that we were working on together. Where are we headed together? How can we support each other? to make sure that we're guiding the growth of this community in the way that we all want. I mean, we all live here. We know what we want from this community and what we want in terms of the living environment, the quality of place, quality of life that we wanted. So we established a steering team, and we pursued a grant opportunity. And we were successful in pursuing that grant opportunity. So through the Bloomington and Monroe County Community Foundation, we secured $35,000. And we had a little bit to make up there, so Dan Rary did a great job of going out into the community, and Mike Farmer, and we raised the rest of the money. We raised an additional $25,000, I believe, with the goal being to hire a firm to come in and help us develop a vision. So I want to talk about that for just a minute, what that really means. What we were hoping to do was use data and inputs, including the town's comprehensive plan, to understand where we were, where we headed, but we also wanted to talk to the community. So a big part of the initiative has been community engagement, and Ron's going to walk you through that and show you the feedback that we heard from the community. So our goal was to get all these different groups who have different perspectives and different roles in our community to give their input into the future of the community, into that vision. It was a cross-community effort with a lot of volunteer hours put in. We had a few different community events where people could put their stickies on the wall and talk to us. And it's been amazing. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna let Lisa come up and just talk you through just a little bit of the process that we used. And then we're gonna turn it over to Ron, and he's gonna walk you through the community engagement so you can see what we learned.
Thank you, Krista. I'm Lisa Cisco. I'm a lifelong resident of the Ellettsville area, and I have 2 sons who live in the town limits and a sister and brother-in-law. I'm not sure if they're really close. If they're not in the town limits, or they're near it. But I think you know my brother-in-law, Tom Kornman, pretty well. He's a longtime employee of the town, and I love Ellettsville, and I'm one of those people that loved it so much I really never wanted to move away, and so I haven't. I've been a part of Ellettsville Main Street since we formed it back in the year 2000, and I was very excited when this opportunity came along. Actually, at the very beginning, I was a little hesitant because I thought, do we really need to hire somebody from the outside? I was aware that Indiana Main Street had opportunities to do a visioning process, but after hearing some of the comments of that meeting and some of the concerns, and talking to some of the staff at Community Foundation and the resources they had, and they started helping us identify stakeholders and thinking again about how fast Ellettsville is growing and the various interests and concerns that we have, that this process could be good. And if there's a grant to help us, that we wouldn't have to come up with all the money. So we worked toward that end, and I think the results have been much greater than what I originally anticipated. And so what I'd like to do is kind of share some of my perspective, having worked with Main Street and working with the town over the last few years, and being here for a long time. Some of our conversations with Main Street, and when we're talking about some of the things that we could do for the downtown focus, because Main Street and Chamber are very similar in our goals for our constituents, which we see as Ellettsville, the Main Street, is mostly downtown. We identify our area as the eye of Ellettsville and about a block around that. So we are concerned about the heart of Ellettsville. The Chamber has a much broader focus, and when we come up with this project, one of the things that we had to figure out early on is really who is the audience, who's the target, who do we need to hear from? And so we identified it this way. Anyone who lives within the town limits definitely is part of the Ellettsville community, and those are the people that you are very much concerned with, and the town council has a responsibility to, because these are their taxpayers. And then we thought about the school systems for Richland Bean Blossom Township. So there's about 6,600 people that were identified of living in the town limits, about another 18,000 that live in Richland and Bean Blossom Townships. But then we also thought there are people who come to Ellettsville to work, or they bring their kids to Ellettsville for their education, or they are passing through, they come to the Hilly 100, Limestone Symposium, or various things. So we said it this way: anyone who has a concern about the Ellettsville community, we want to include them as part of this process. And so when we did hire the consultant, some of the mechanisms for getting the input were available through the internet, and focus groups and individual interviews that Ron Taylor did with some of the key business leaders in the community, and including Mike Farmer, so that we got a wide variety of input. And you'll see that the document that we come up with, it's really amazing. It's this is a hardbound copy, and we actually want to give you, the plan department, this copy for your resources, because we've used your Plan Commission document as a resource to get us to this point. Whenever we, here. You're welcome. Yeah, and Kevin Talati, whom Denise has replaced, but Kevin was a part of our steering committee that we referred to earlier. He was a part of our interviewing team that interviewed, because let me back up and say, when we started this process, I want to give you a few more details than what Krista elaborated on. We applied for this grant back in the fall of 2019. That seems like a long time ago, right? We were awarded the grant, and we got started, and then COVID hit. And so we had a pause in 2020. But in December of 2020, when we could start to see the light of day a little bit, we said we want to get this group reorganized. So we had a Zoom meeting, which became the standard way of having meetings, and we got reinvigorated. We decided to hire Kyle Hannon, as our project manager to help us stay organized and get going on this. And so we had input from different parties. We developed a request for proposal. One of the key documents that we said that anyone who wants to respond to us needs to look at the Ellettsville Comprehensive Plan. There is a vision statement as a part of that plan, and you look in the appendix, there are there's information of how Kevin and his team come up with the comprehensive plan, and there were community surveys. I know Gina from Main Street, Gina Kapczynski, she participated in that, and they had various meetings and to come up with that. They just didn't pull it out of the sky, right, Denise? Right, so it was a community document, and it was finished and produced, and I wanted to get a copy so I could show it, because it's been something I've referred to many times. We've utilized it in our input to Main Street, because this has been very helpful. Kevin was very helpful too when we have to do annual assessments and provide some data about the community. When Lieutenant Governor Susan Crouch was here a couple of years ago, one of her first statements was information that we had provided from our Main Street annual assessment. So all of this works together. We have different focuses, but we couldn't do it without that Plan Commission document. Sorry, I'm not Italian, but I get it from my mom. Can't talk without my hands. But we have built, hopefully, as you will see, on that Plan Commission document. And in the results that Ron is going to share some details on through this process, it was identified that there's 47 points in the comprehensive plan that maybe could use some tweaking, if you will, to help make some modifications for allowing some of the things that has been discussed. And we want to work with the Plan Commission to see if you agree and to help make recommendations to the Town Council, which is the decision-making body. They hold the purse strings, and they will approve any contracts that are made. And just recently, as you know, at the Town Council meeting, it was determined that there is a memorandum of understanding between our three organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, the Ellettsville Main Street, and our anchor, the town of Ellettsville, represented by the Town Council. So we had to get that secured first in order to be able to come to you and say, we want you to consider utilizing the input from Ron Taylor And the reason why we chose that company, getting back to the RFP, is we had 21 responses. 21 organizations wanted us to do business with us. We narrowed it down to the top 10. We interviewed them. We checked out references with other communities, and Ron Taylor's group came out as the cream of the crop. And he's proven with his company that they have a wide variety of expertise, and they also have a deep bench. They can, not just with their company, but they can work with other people. And so we've been very, very pleased with the results that the team has provided. And I'm thankful for the teams and Pam Samples and William Ellis from the town, of course Mike Farmer and some others. We've had a lot of people providing input. And one of the concerns that we've talked about for a very, very long time is what to do about flooding. I know there's been some constraints because of getting approval from the state and federal regarding what you can do in the creek. And the timing is good that we're getting some resolutions made, but then it's like, how do we come up with a plan? Well, it just works out that the Taylor Group has that type of expertise that they can help with that. And as you are familiar probably with the different task forces now that we have proposed to the town council, we're working to find solutions. And we want to work with you in doing some planning and revision of that comprehensive plan where it needs to. It's a beautiful document, it was well thought out, and it's a building block. If you remember back to the year 2000, Bill Land was a part-time planner. We had a part-time planner for Ellettsville. And through that town process, then we come up with a document that was called Ellettsville 2020. Well, we're past Ellettsville 2020, so we keep plugging away, looking always to the future. And as Clark Greiner, I remember him saying is like, we want sensible growth, which means we want to be able to afford it. We don't want to grow so fast like Dallas did a few years, several years ago. It was a case study when I was in business school, is that how they grew so fast and then their town was empty in certain areas, and that's not what we want. So we're very concerned about that. We also know that some of the consultants, when they're doing a visioning process, some towns don't want to grow. They're close to an interstate, which could cause them to grow, and they want to control that growth. So this growth is based on what we want. It's not what the Taylor Group wants. It's what we as a community want, and then they help us through that process to get it. So I appreciate the time this evening and look forward to some opportunity to answer some questions. I would like to share just one little paragraph. When somebody gets to begin understanding Envision Ellettsville, if they can remember at least the 5 things, the themes for the Ellettsville, and you see them in the banners along the street. Flash forward 10 years, Ellettsville is a complete community that is diverse in its offerings and ensures everyday services, facilities, and amenities are already or readily available. The hope is that when a resident asks, what is Ellettsville like? The residents may feel empowered to say, Ellettsville are these following things. Ellettsville is home. Ellettsville is vibrant. Ellettsville is connected. Ellettsville is thriving. And Ellettsville is strategic. That is the vision for the future. And when we had our community celebration right here on May 17th, and we had several activities around the town hall, one of the gentlemen, his story was his wife graduated from Ellettsville. They had lived down into Florida, and their goal was to come back and raise their family here in Ellettsville. We've heard that multiple times now. People want to come back. They want to be able to have their family here. I'm excited that I have 2 of my adult children living in this community, and another one's going to be living close by, and that means a lot, but I want them to be able to thrive, not just survive, and that's what we are working toward for the Ellettsville community, so we want to work hand in hand with you to make this happen. And we want more people to be involved, so we have a plan for that as well, and developing task forces to take these topics and get more input to work with the town government to help make these things happen at the pace that's determined by us all working together. Again, I thank you for your time.
Lisa?
Yes.
I don't know that a couple of members know what the task forces are and their purpose, so can somebody explain that later?
I think Ron's gonna cover that.
Okay.
Yeah,
But that's a great question, but it might be easier
Yes.
to see it with a visual.
Okay.
Yes, and there's descriptions, and in that book, there's pages toward the back in chapter 4 that cover that. And we're open to ideas and suggestions still, because any good plan is one that doesn't sit on the shelf and collect dust. It's one that keeps getting used and modified as time goes on.
Okay, thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
I need a little help firing up the computer if I can. Oh, you've got the power over there. Okay.
So if I put it on slideshow, will it keep advancing or?
No. No, you can start that way. Can I use your mouse to do the advancing?
I guess.
I'll give it back to you. I won't take off with it, although I do sometimes walk off with things. And this is a nice.
Isn't that?
So, thanks for having me down here. My name is Ron Taylor. I'm a principal with Taylor Siefker Williams Design Group. We're an urban design, urban planning, and landscape architecture firm based out of Indianapolis and Louisville. I can't possibly talk as passionately or as eloquently as Krista and Lisa does about Envision Ellettsville. So bear with me as I sort of take you through some of this. But what I wanted to do tonight was tell you specifically about the planning process that we went through and give you a sense of what Envision Ellettsville was all about as a project, if you will. So let's see here if we can click this. I don't think this is the right presentation. Well, maybe it is. We'll go with it. We'll see where it goes here. So I'm going to stay up about 30,000 feet tonight. So I'm going to try to stay conceptual, try to give you sort of the long view from high up. I'm willing to go as deep into the weeds as you'd like with specific questions, but I'll sort of let you lead that. And otherwise, I'm going to give you the overview, and we'll see kind of where the conversation goes from there. So I think that a lot of times people will ask us, well, what is Envision Ellettsville? And if I had to sort of come up with my elevator speech of how I would explain it to somebody very quick, it really was a community conversation about where the town of Ellettsville wants to be in the future. So this is not a comprehensive plan document. This is not any sort of requirement like a zoning ordinance. There aren't things in here that people are required to do and that the document ties them to do. What this is a documented planning process that really was about talking to residents and understanding where they wanted to go as the town developed further. And that's going to be important. Now, what I will say is the document that has been, as a result of this, it is a directive document, meaning that it does provide some direction if you choose to go in certain directions. It does establish the vision of what the community told us that they wanted to be, but it's not technically even a policy document until there's some action or actionable steps taken to make it so. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through here as well. There's been a lot of talk about the public engagement, and this plan, when we first started, we were told this is a community conversation that now has been going on for more than, I don't know, a year. Conversations were happening. What they wanted to do was build upon what had already been done in the community and wanted to kind of reach out to residents and understand what they wanted to see in the future of this development. So just to give you sort of an overview of that, there was a steering committee of almost 30 people that we had 7 sort of meetings that helped to guide the project and keep the project moving. There were working sessions with the town council as well as a kind of a periodic presentation that would update them. We did identify some key stakeholders that we felt we wanted to talk to and really focus in on some very specific needs in the community. So we talked obviously to the town, we talked to the BEDC, we looked at the school district, we looked at some of your major employers and met with them, all trying to understand what is their vision, what do they need Ellettsville to be to continue to thrive and be successful. We also put together a series of focus groups, and the purpose of the focus groups was to say, well, let's get some like-minded people around the table, and let's focus in the conversations on some very specific aspects that we know you'll be dealing with. So we had a local business owners focus group that was made up of people who own businesses in Ellettsville talking about the business climate. We had a young professionals group, which was mostly young people who have come back to the community to establish their careers and to live here and to raise their families here. The best one, and by far, this is one of the most progressive things I've ever seen a community do, we had a high school seniors focus group. So instead of going just to the young professionals or older people saying, what would bring young people back, we went to the young people and we sat down and we said, what do you need or what do you want in order to make Ellettsville your home? Like, so many kids go away to college and they never come back. How do we bring you back? What are the things that you'd like to see and that you need in order to make this where you live and raise your family? So I thought that was really pretty progressive. That's one of the things. I'm going to copy that one in every community I work in because that was like one of the best ideas I think that we had. They mentioned that there were still, we started this process kind of at the tail end of the COVID. So we were all sort of trying to figure out, can we get back together? Can we still do things? How do we start to make sure that even though we're all a little separated, we're able to still get as much engagement as possible? So we did go online with a lot of our engagement. We had a Facebook page. We had an interactive website where the same types of things that we did with people in person, they could do on site. It included survey questions, there were map exercises, there were vision statement evaluations, and these are just a few of those numbers. There were 812 unique website views, over 1,000 total sessions on that. There were 84 vision wall comments, 97 interactive map comments, and over 413 public survey visits. Those are really good numbers. When you look at the turnout that we typically see from community and residents on an online thing, the percentages and the numbers here were very good. So people were willing to engage. The website activities, they weren't easy activities. I mean, you had to invest some time, and people took the time to really kind of get into the map and start talking about some different areas. So I think that was a really good, we got really good results from the time that we spent doing that. We did have a public visioning workshop on September 15th of 2021. There was a public survey where we got the 413 comments I talked about. And then we even went a step further in saying, okay, well, if somebody can't come to the meetings, they're not comfortable, and maybe if they're not really tech savvy and they don't want to get online, how can we still get that information out there? So we put together a mobile display that was all about the visioning process and the exercises, and then sent that out into the community. So you may have noticed that if you were at the chamber, or if you went to, I know it was at a church, there was one time it was at a grocery store. The thing started to kind of move around so that people could give us responses, even if they weren't comfortable coming to the meetings that we were having here. And then I will say that there's been some public support that not all communities get when they do the visioning exercise. I think Governor Holcomb, when he was here, this was the headline, and this was at the beginning of the process, talking about how this community was being interactive in determining its destiny and talking about what it wanted to be. Those conversations aren't happening everywhere. We also had some public support. It was mentioned that the Lieutenant Governor was in town. These are a couple of photos from the chamber luncheon where she was a featured speaker, who talked about things Ellettsville is doing, kind of took some time aside from that luncheon to actually go through some of our materials. So there was lots, those are signs that there's public support beyond just the residents and just the chairs of the committee. And then when the whole thing was said and done, we had a community celebration, and a couple of folks have mentioned this, where we pretty much filled this room, and people could come and we could spend time inside here talking about the specific plan elements, or they could go out in the lawn out back and eat at food trucks. But the idea was to bring the community together to see what the results were and to find out, to get their buy-in that, yeah, this is what we talked about, and this helps us set a direction for where we would like to go as a community. So let me tell you a little bit about what's in the document that, that Lisa has shown you. And again, I still want to stay high at an overview, but if you've got questions, we can go a little bit deeper. Probably the most important thing that I would share with this is that vision statement. And Lisa read part of this, but it's the idea that it's one thing to ask people what they want. It's another thing to make them come up and develop language that articulates not what they want, but what it means for the community to be. And this really is that. So I promise this will be the last slide that I read completely to you, but I think this is worth hearing. I mean, this is the biggest outcome of this. Ellettsville, envision Ellettsville as a complete community. A town in transition, residents, business owners, and local leaders are ready to embrace growth. Today, Ellettsville is a family-oriented residential community that strives to have its own distinct identity. Opportunity is knocking on our door, and now is the time to be proactive in cultivating a future that is inspired by our current residents and inviting to newcomers. In the future, Ellettsville will be a complete community that is diverse in its offerings and ensures everyday services, facilities, and amenities are readily available. Ellettsville will be a place where business and residents thrive. A complete community is one that provides safe neighborhoods, supports a vibrant downtown, maintains a connected system of parks and recreation, generates a thriving business environment, and drives strategic growth. So that's the vision that's been encapsulated by all of those different comments and all the different things that were brought to the table during this process. And you can see that's still pretty broad, and it's still pretty flowery. It's not saying that we should zone commercial properties to be X, Y, Z. It doesn't get to that level, but what it does start to do is it starts to articulate that the things residents would like to see as Ellettsville continues to grow. So there was the themes that Lisa had mentioned, and real quickly, so what we had to look at real early in the process was the idea that we started getting all of these different comments and this different feedback. How do we start to organize it and put it into an organizational structure that starts to make sense? So we began by looking at these 5 big themes that the community identified, and all of the different recommendations and the analysis that came back fell into one of these themes. It was Ellettsville as home, and that one really is sort of the residential component of it. It's about neighborhoods and housing. Ellettsville is vibrant, which relates to all the comments we received about downtown, everything downtown Ellettsville. Ellettsville is connected, which was about the pedestrian infrastructure and parks and recreation. Ellettsville is thriving, which we meant to include all things related to the business environment in the town. And then Ellettsville is strategic, which is about the focused growth areas that we'll talk about here in a little bit. So let's go through a little bit about the vision plan recommendations. So the plan does have some recommendations that resulted from that. And there really were 2 types of recommendations that came out of here. So the first one is what we would call the foundational projects. These are big community-wide efforts that need to happen in order for a lot of the recommendations to be able to be put into place. So if you think about it, those types of things are your policy documents. They're your comprehensive plan. They're your community-wide pedestrian and trail plans. These are all things that sort of set the tone and the regulatory requirements for the entire community. So the first round of recommendations has to do with updating those foundational projects. Yeah, I think we have the wrong presentation here. That's okay, we'll keep going with it, maybe. The second type of recommendation that came out was more what we called focus areas. And so these are very specific projects. So for instance, if somebody says they want to see more commercial development, that probably goes back to a comp plan or a foundational element. If somebody says that they'd like to develop the Stewart property as a park, that's more of a specific project. So the recommendations that come out of this, there's the foundational elements, which are the bigger community-wide initiatives, as well as the smaller very project-specific initiatives that will come out of there. And then we looked at 4 different focus areas within the community to start demonstrating how those different themes could be applied. So we looked at the area downtown as sort of the downtown improvement areas. We had the West Side Business Park that we looked at in terms of the types of business park development that could be created there. Residential development is shown in the yellow. We looked at the North End residential areas, and then we took a look at how some of the commercial development further down on 46 could be reconfigured in a way that matched more of what we heard about the types of commercial development patterns that people would like to see. In each of those elements, we still were coming up with long lists of comments. And so what we tried to do was focus them a little bit more into some general types of topical discussions. So those focus areas, we looked very specifically at the idea of connectivity in each of those, creating gathering space, sort of the branding, looking at enhancements, and then looking at things that developed character and development. So when you go through the document, this is what you'll see when you start to get to these areas for the focus areas. So the first spread, if you will, describes what that focus area is and what the objectives are, and then there's an image that's developed. And when you review this, I'd spend some time looking at the image, because the image is intended to encapsulate a lot of different things that have been incorporated into that. So for instance, on this North Residential, not only are you just seeing sort of the generic housing patterns, but there's different types of housing, there's different types of connectivity and pedestrian facilities incorporated into this. So each one of these chapters or sections of the document for the focus areas will start out showing this vision image, if you will, and then it goes through each of those issues that we talked about. So there's a connectivity analysis for each of the focus areas. There's a gathering analysis that speaks very particular to the idea of how these public spaces become areas where you can generate some activity. There's a branding discussion and a branding analysis that happens for each of those focus areas. There's sort of the idea of the enhancements, and then also character and development recommendations for each of those. So, and that all gets wrapped up by the matrix that somebody mentioned earlier about there are a series of steps or recommendations for each of these focus areas of things that the town can begin to do to incorporate this. Some of these things are small, some of these things are big, some of these things cost a lot of money, some of these things cost no money. So it's a whole mix of different types of recommendations that say if you would want to reach this level of development, or this is the vision you have for it, here are the types of things you need to start thinking about. So I'll go through these. I've blown the graphics up a little bit here for you just to give you a sense of what's included in each of the focus areas. This first one is what we called the North Residential. And the North Residential was really taking a look at the housing market and trying to figure out how do we continue to maintain the type of housing that residents and business owners and local business leaders have said that they want to see in Ellettsville? And how do you start to make sure that that housing is still affordable to the people who live here? And then how do you start to bring in those things? How do you connect those neighborhoods with trails or with sidewalks? How do you interlace parks and recreation properties into some of those? And so that big vision statement starts to show how all those things can begin to work together. The second focus area was basically the downtown and the central Ellettsville area. And there's a few different graphics for this. There's a plan view of some ideas that were generated during the planning process, as well as some of the aerials that would show some of these things. And really what this was about was starting to understand the flooding issue and how the flood control projects that you're currently going through will start to impact the downtown, and then how you make it so that that flood control project isn't a constraint, it becomes an asset that you can use to leverage development and attract new businesses to downtown. So when you look at that image very closely, or you read through the document, you'll start to see discussions about the type of development that you can have downtown, how you start to leverage and bring trails through downtown, how that flood control is used more as an asset and a feature for the downtown than it is, and it makes it unique as opposed to it being something that's intrusive on the downtown. The third focus area dealt with the West Side Business Park, and this was taking a look at what new business park development could look like. So I'm sure you've all probably heard the concepts of some of the business parks that are now being developed that aren't just about business. They're also about trying to attract places where people can gather, where a business park actually can become a destinational type thing with activities that happens. In some cases, it's even there's even places where the living component is incorporated into it. But this idea started to show how this business park could be developed using a lot of the principles and things that people had talked about during our public engagement. So some of the things that included, allowing for a diverse mix of businesses, providing sort of high-end utility services, and encouraging the use of different economic development tools to help establish that. And then the final focus area was the State Road 46 commercial corridor. And again, this was taking a look at the way that State Road 46 could be developed that would be different than what you've got now. We heard a lot of feedback about how congested and how difficult all the curb cuts are, that the patterns that have been developed commercially are tough. And so what we tried to do was demonstrate what a vision could be for how some of those things could begin to develop in a way that addressed a lot of those different issues. So where do we go next? We've got a big idea book. We've got the conversation documented. We've talked to residents. You've got a really good turnout in your residents giving you feedback and ideas and direction. But what do we do with it now that we've got that? How do we continue to move forward? So there's a couple things. The document, the Envision Ellettsville plan, does talk about what we do next, because what you had during this process was a focus group of about 30 very energetic, very passionate volunteers that were willing to do the brain work to make some of this happen, to help figure out, how does this work? What do we need to work on? They even figured out, when do I need to hire a consultant? When do I not need to hire a consultant? So that brain work is still something that's going to be needed as you start to move forward. So what the document proposes, the funding source for any work going on is going to be the town of Ellettsville. So the top of this org chart you see is the town of Ellettsville, which is run through the town council. And then that does include not only the council, that includes plan commission, or it includes departments and staff, but the idea the town is the one that's holding the contracts or kind of controlling where this process goes next. The big circle you see that's next down, the steering committee that we have now, that again is sometimes as big as 30 people, is going to be narrowed down to, we call it a board. I don't know that it's actually a board, but it's going to be narrowed down to a group of probably 5 or 6 individuals that are going to serve as sort of the liaison between the town and the volunteers that are doing the work. And then the last level down there are the 6 different task forces that the steering committee identified that they wanted to gather to further work on some of the volunteer efforts of trying to understand next steps and so forth. So again, you can see that they're right along with the same themes that we had throughout the Envision Ellettsville. So the task forces, there's a connectivity task force, a gathering task force, a branding task force, a beautification task force, one for housing, and then one for business matters. And again, the idea there is that still would be, that is still a volunteer working group that's working towards what needs to be done in order to implement any of the items, the recommendations from that plan. So I'm sorry, this is the right presentation. So, my fault, sorry. Out of all those recommendations, the town has identified 6 priorities, and to be fair, there's really about 4 here, but I'll explain that as we get into it. But the town's identified 6 priorities as the sort of starting point for how we move Envision Ellettsville forward, and I'm going to tell you about those here one by one. So the first one is what we called program administration and technical support. And this is a recognition by the town that when you look at having 6 task forces that are all volunteer, you've got a volunteer board, what you're missing is staff. You're missing a staff person that can move those things forward and keep those things moving. And right now, that's not a task that's been assigned to any different department. Your planning department is already short. Denise is doing like everything she can. So what this is a task order for us, my company, to assist the town in making sure that we're organizing and moving those task forces forward. So that's a task order that has been approved by the town council on July 25th. A second task order that was deemed to be a priority, Ellettsville is a victim of your own success, because one of the big recommendations in the Envision Ellettsville plan was to look at the Heritage Trail and continue the work on the Heritage Trail. And I think that right at the same time that we were wrapping up Envision Ellettsville, you received your grant to do that. And so, you know, like all good grant sources, as soon as they give you the money, you're on the clock. You've got a limited amount of time to do that. So the second priority, I think that the Next Level Trail was probably further down on the priority list. It got bumped up to being a more urgent priority. And so the town council approved a contract to do the design and engineering for that on July 25th. The next 2 are both projects that are identified in the Envision Ellettsville plan. So the development of parks throughout the community and the way that the parks link into different neighborhoods is one of the main components of the connectivity part of the plan. And there is a property called the Stewart property that has been designated for a park. I think there's lots of ideas. There's potential grant resources out there. What there isn't is a plan. And so this priority, it's not doing a full design of the park, but what it's doing is creating a conceptual plan of what that park could be so that you can apply for grant money and do things. And then the 4th priority is very similar. It's a conceptual design for the downtown streetscape area on Vine Street, because your flood control project, the permits have been received, it's moving forward. And so now what happens to the other areas that are down there? How are they going to interface and how are they going to work together? So these are both, it's not final design for the streetscape, but it's a conceptual design. It's, again, the idea of getting a plan so we can begin formulating where does the money come from, how do you get grants, or whatever it is that you're going to do. So both of those were approved on August 11th by town council. And then there's still 2 pending priorities that are we're working with the town council at this point on doing. So the 5th one is doing an update of the comprehensive plan and developing a new unified development ordinance. The important part of this is the unified development ordinance. So this is probably the one group we don't have to explain the problems between your zoning and your subdivision control. In communities across Indiana, they're moving towards a more unified development ordinance that can help clarify and make your job easier as a planner. So the idea was that we really need to get to that ordinance. What you have in a comp plan is a little bit older, and you're going to end up needing to update that in a bit. So what the town, we talked with the town and the Envision Ellettsville group about was the idea that when you look at the Envision Ellettsville project that we just went through and all the input that you got, you've done a lot of the work that you would normally do for a comp plan. What you haven't done is the detailed land use analysis. That's the one part of the comp plan that's not been done. We looked at those 4 areas, so there is land use recommendations for those 4 areas, but the areas between haven't been looked at. So the idea is, instead of updating and going through a full comp plan update. The idea is that we do the land use component and start to develop what the land use part is. We use the public engagement we've already, spent a lot of money to get, combine those two, and then that becomes your updated comprehensive plan. And the majority of this task order would focus on developing the UDO that would support the comp plan. And then the final one is, the final priority of this, it's not really this is the one I was saying, it's not really an Envision Ellettsville recommendation, but the idea that, right now your planning department is short. And I'm sure that Denise could tell you the list of things that she has on her plate. This is something that the town asked us for in order to be able to help with some planning assistance and provide some staff assistance on planning elements that may come up that they don't have time doing. So this is the one task order that's really more of a contract between the city. It's just been lumped in with these 6 priorities, so that's why we keep kind of seeing this. There's been no action taken by town council on this. This is kind of the lowest of the 6 priorities. The comp plan and the UDO, I should mention, there has been a presentation about that to the town council, but that was tabled on August 8th, and I think it was pending a discussion with you to make sure you were aware of it, and because we knew that you had some questions about that. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have about
Ron, I just want to make a note too. I think maybe that slide's a little bit out of date because we do have Denise now in place as the planner. So it says until new planner is hired, so. just wanna check.
Well, but, so you had 2 before.
Oh, Denise and Kevin, that's
Right.
true.
So,
No, I was assistant.
right, but now you're it.
Yeah, until I can hire somebody.
Okay, so that's what you're
That-
referring to.
yes, that's the
Helping
reference there.
Helping Denise, yeah.
And I'll be glad to go into the details of that. We don't have any specific work items associated with that yet. It's an on-call type thing, but if something came up and the town needed a quick assistance with that, it gives them the power to be able to have us help them if something were to come up on quick notice, because it's part of a master agreement they've already signed. So. Lots of ways to continue to be involved. So what's up there is the website for the Envision Ellettsville, which is still up there. You can go and look at the, you can go look at a lot of the input. You can look at the plan in more detail at that website. There's also the envisionellettsville@gmail.com is an email that will go directly to Kyle, so that if you've got comments or questions or you hear something and you got a question, you can always send it to that as well and get some quick answers on that. So I don't know, are there any questions?
That was a very good and in-depth presentation.
We kind of went, I didn't fulfill my promise of 25 minutes. I'm
Oh, that's
sorry.
okay. No, you're all right. You're all right. No, I just meant that was a very good presentation.
So we know, darn last if we would come, we knew you had a lot of questions. And so the goal was to give you this high-level overview and just see what else is on your mind. Is there anything that we didn't answer tonight that is a concern or that you want to talk in depth about?
Maybe I'll start it. Everybody else go sit there, I guess. Can you back that up to the 6 priorities?
Yep. Well, I can do 4, or I can do.
That's fine, that's
Okay.
fine. I guess my question is why'd you go to the town council and not come here?
For which one?
For all of them, any of them? The
So-
trail design, the parks, all of that stuff.
Well, I can't, sure.
For the next level trail design and engineering, that was something that is a concept, and we worked with Bine and Fanyo to help with the trail, and then Kevin and I worked on the mapping for it and did the grants, so it was not necessarily something that needed to come before the Plan Commission. So what Ron's group will be doing when he says to design a trail for the grant, we have our outline of our mileage, and then he's going to design, and there's gonna be a survey, because we have to have design drawings to submit to the DNR for approval so we can get our funding and get going.
Well,
Does that
let's
answer
look.
your question?
Yes. How about parks? I mean, isn't that part of the planning department to look at the community and see where parks are put?
Yes.
You know, you say you got pocket parks in these, in this thing here, and I would think,
What some people are missing here is that you can't really put the cart before the horse. The involvement of the town council was to approve the funding to do these things.
That's correct.
And then we were going to be involved once the contract was approved.
And that was our understanding, David, that the contracts have to be done with the town council. So
Right.
that's exactly, you just hit the nail on the head, yeah.
And the idea with the task forces is there's none in operation now. This is a conceptual idea to how we communicate on topics, is that through the task forces, which could have people in the community that have some expertise, maybe there is someone with some planning experience, get that consensus from a task force to make a recommendation, if appropriate, to come through the plan commission, and then you make a recommendation to the town council. That's how we see like doing this bottom-up approach for the ideas to flow. But to get going, we need to have that organizational structure. How are we going to be able to pay for things and do things, keeping in mind that the town is obligated as a governmental unit to do certain things. The plan commission is your job to do. We want to be able to help and offer ideas and suggestions, but that's your responsibility to do. And so that's why we had to start with the town council to get that master agreement. And we did do a memorandum of understanding amongst the town council, the chamber, and Main Street to kind of set some ground rules, how we're going to interact with one another.
You didn't look like that answered your question.
they don't make any difference.
Sure it does.
No, it don't.
So I think the
No.
easiest answer there is that the town is the one with the budget to be able to do those contracts. I don't think there was any intent to circumvent the plan commission. In fact, like if you look at the contract scopes, I think that they even mentioned that there are points where the plan commission is involved or is given presentations. So,
You know, we've been sitting up here, I have, for many years, and I didn't see anything in that or in here. From one end of Ellettsville to the other, we don't have, that's not all Ellettsville. There's Monroe County involved here, and I haven't heard anything about that. I mean, we have businesses that are in Monroe County and not in Ellettsville,
that's correct.
okay? And, you know, it seems to me like we do want to go and get that fixed first, so we can tell the people that, yeah, this is Ellettsville. You know, my daughter went to school here and graduated. My son, they come back and they says, okay, Dad, is this in Ellettsville? And I said, no. Is that in Ellettsville? Yeah. That in Ellettsville? No.
Pat, welcome to my nightmare.
You know,
At the
Ron,
big-
can I answer this one?
Sure.
My first comments that I explained is, as we started doing this, we had several discussions about how do we define the Ellettsville community? And there was different ways of looking at it. We even talked about zip codes, how that's confusing. That some people said, why do you have a Bloomington zip code in the town limits of Ellettsville? So different people have different ideas on what the Ellettsville community is defined in. And what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and that's why we use that word Greater Ellettsville. It's not just the town limits. The town provides services outside of the town limits in supporting out into the broader community as a way to help offer growth in the future. And with the school system, we felt like that was a reason to expand it to at least include, it's easy to say if you're part of Richland Township and Bee Blossom, you have an interest in Ellettsville. So we do have ideas for what that expansion can be into the county areas. And that's why, like Clark Reiner from the BEDC, which I wish they changed the name because it's not just Bloomington, it is an economic development corporation for the entire county. But we have them at the table. He and Jen Provost and others have been there. Ron and I did a presentation just a couple of weeks ago to the stakeholders of the BEDC as a way to share. These are some of the ideas that have come up from the greater Ellettsville community, and growth is going to happen whether we do anything or not. We're hearing that, people are calling all the time. They want to live here, they want to work here, they want to start a business here, they want to know the nuts and bolts of that. And we've had sprawl along 46 for years. It's been a lot of automotive focus. We've had an X-rated drive-in. We've had a stinky town depending on the way the wind blows. And it's because people have said, we don't like this, we want to do something about it. And not that we don't like what's going on now, we just want to make what's good or great, greater. And putting an investment, and that's what it was. It cost us $55,000 to hire this professional firm, and I think they've been worth every penny because they have been able to pull this information together and be able to present it in a way that we can start making sense and understanding where we have like minds and where we have the highest priorities, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what the opportunities are, and what our threats are. We have Bloomington that's wanting to come this way. How are we going to stop that growth from happening? Because we need to protect our tax revenue base. We have issues with the fire protection. How are we going to resolve that? I'd love to hear that, but that's not part of my expertise, but I'd love to hear a task force chew on some of these ideas and make some recommendations, because these things are happening whether we want to do something about it or not. And going back to when the State Road 46 was going to be widened, we had, and there was discussions, and many of you probably remember, whether the state wanted to bypass around Ellettsville. What if they'd done that? What did we as a community do instead? And I was part of the Bloomington Chamber then. With the Chamber, and we had discussions with Spencer and Ellettsville, we created the State Road 46 Committee. The tagline, it's our turn. And we worked with the Indiana Department of Transportation. We had Chris Click, the commissioner, come down, be a part of chamber meetings, and with Main Street, and then we had an Ellettsville Area Economic Development Corporation. It was a good testimony that if you work with the people that have influence on what's going to happen to you, you're going to have a better result. Had we not worked with them, where we have the Great Ways, they would have just put in concrete. But what do we have? Because we worked with them, we've got the Seymour District. We knew them on a first name basis. They were coming and having breakfast at our restaurants here. We got to know those guys, and talking, the communications were wide open. It was a good, positive relationship, and that's what we want to develop going forward. And having this professional expertise, we see that as kind of not a gift, but in a way a gift, is that with this grant that we secured, we've been able to find a company that has dug deep in understanding the comprehensive plan, knowing it almost forward and backwards, because that is such an important document, that they've been able to come up with recommendations. Their bench is deep. They can provide some of the manpower to help make some of these changes that are going to happen. Because how are we going to do the next level trail grant if we didn't have somebody ready to provide those design solutions? It's Biden FAMU possibly, or the Taylor Group. And what about some of these other things? How are we going to solve all these things? And we hope that you'll see that this investment and this time spent, at one point Kyle was kind of keeping track of some of the volunteer hours. But that's an investment of volunteers' time to come up with a way to help the town that we love, our town council, which you've got responsibilities, how we can work together.
And we still got a lot of working to do and figure out how those task forces are gonna operate, but that's what we come up with as a way to work on these problems.
Let me make sure one thing doesn't get lost in the discussion, Pat. So what Envision Ellettsville is a vision document. It's the articulation of what folks said that they want the community to be. Remember at the beginning I said it's not a comprehensive plan, it's not a zoning document. The vision document does not say and has no power to tell people to annex land or not to annex land or to be part. That's going to be in your comprehensive plan and your UDO ordinance. That's where that work gets done. And that's where we believe that next logical planning step is. So again, the vision document sets forth that vision, but it doesn't have the nuts and bolts. Annexation was talked about a lot, and the properties that aren't, like, there were lots of discussions about that, but that's ultimately, those decisions get made as part of that planning process and not a vision plan. Does that help?
Well, and the state has made involuntary annexation almost impossible at this point, so.
I think that's a reason why it was important to get the community involved too. I mean, there are, I think to Pat's point, that we got a mixed bag of some things, right? And we want people to get on board and get excited. We don't want to fight people. I mean, you'll hear people over and over that we don't want to be Bloomington, right? We don't want that kind of argument that's going on in Bloomington. We want people to be excited. We want them to get on board.
Well, and to address Pat's point one more time, I do think there probably could have been better communication. I don't know that we can lay that on any of you. That's not your responsibility. We have council members on here. I think they probably just assumed that we knew all about it and didn't think to bring it up. I don't know.
Well, David, I've been sitting here biting my tongue through the whole thing, and I agree. It's not these guys. Because I'm sure if anyone watched the council meeting, they seen I was very upset with the whole process. And it wasn't with you people at all. I think it was, without upsetting everyone again, it was the staff's problem here. I just heard, tonight that you were working with Kevin. He said on the group, I don't know whether he didn't tell us because of the lack of planning commission meetings we had, or really what was said, and it probably was my fault that I didn't bring it, but I really didn't think I seen the big picture, I guess, until, to the later meetings, and by then, it was too late, because the planning commission had not had a meeting in 3 months, so I think it was a little bit of everyone's fault here on the staff that it didn't get brought to us because, on our agenda, we have planning department updates. And Denise, I'm not looking at you, I just stared at you for a minute, but I think, the biggest thing, Pat, was that the meetings, we were missing meetings and not having meetings because of lack of business or whatever, but to me, this would have made a whole meeting in itself, so I'm a little upset Kevin didn't really choose to, schedule a meeting to bring all the planning commission and even me up to date on this, so I guess that's all I'm gonna go into it as far
But
with
it's,
that.
yeah, we're, now that
Yeah.
we've said all that, we're kind of beyond that at this
Yep.
point, and it's time to stop beating that dead horse and move
Exactly.
on.
I did the same thing though, Dan. I do communications for a living, and I immediately went to what could we have done better? And I do think we thought we were communicating with the right people, so this, I'm not gonna lie, it caught us off guard. But I do agree, with something you said really resonated with me, and it's like seeing the big picture. And I think anytime you're doing something new that you maybe never done before, new groups working together, that sometimes it's not until you see sort of that end output and those visuals that you kind of go, ah. I've been involved since 2019, until I saw this. I didn't really know quite how it was all gonna fit together. I knew that I wanted to make sure that we listened to the community and that we were trying to collaborate with the right people. But I agree with you, sometimes until you see it and you have it in your hands, then you go, now I see this. And so, I totally agree, and that totally makes sense. So I know we're talking a lot about communication moving forward. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
I can talk about that a little bit as well. Again, I'm Kyle Hannon, some of you I know. And one thing to think of too is that this document's great, but it's also a concept. There's no park designed in this yet. There's the idea that the people said we want more parks, so in the drawings you sort of have a conceptual green space that's sort of a park, but there are no parks yet. But that's where you're gathering place task forces, and these various task forces we have sort of laid out. My plan going forward, unless you guys want to personally attend each of the 6 meetings every month, maybe what I'll do is give you updates on what's going on. Try to do a brief thing, which Pam knows I try to do that with our different task forces leading into the larger steering committee, just updates. Here's what's going on. It won't be complicated, but it'll be, if you have a question about something, you think, oh, I better ask more about what's going on with that. But kind of as the task forces put the details into what this vision might look like going forward, you're invited to be part of all of that, and I'm going to let you know as much as I can, what's going on in all of those, just so there are no surprises. No surprises. You kind of know what's going on.
And I think our collaboration with Denise is really important. I mean, we've talked about that, and we want to have a strong relationship with her moving forward and be an asset to her. So I do think, to your point, I think there were some gaps there. We want to close them, and we want to move forward.
Can't they also volunteer to serve on your task force
Absolutely.
as well?
Absolutely.
You can also volunteer to serve on one of the task force.
Yeah.
Which would give you a greater personal involvement in some of those particular areas, but there will be elements like on the comp plan that you will have to be more intricately involved in helping to craft like what those design standards, what those regulations are going to be, and how that new ordinance would work. So I think you've sort of got layers of involvement. You can kind of go as deep as you want on some of these issues, or you can sort of focus your efforts where you think that you're the most interested in being involved. But
And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so great to have these other groups involved. I mean, I have 2 jobs. I don't have time to go do all these things. So for someone to be able to do the legwork and then bring those issues to us is very important.
I think I can't remember your first name, Kyle, I think it's excellent what you said about bringing us up periodically. For 5 minutes at a meeting and saying, hey, this A, B, C, and D is doing this, where before it got thrown into us. I saw it on TV, that what was going on, okay? The town council, I think, made some decisions that we didn't know about. I'm not saying it wasn't the right decisions, I'm just saying that I worked in business for 60 years. I had 5, 6 states, had a bunch of people. And communications, you have to have communications. And we just didn't have any. There was no communications. Like we said, we didn't have a plan meeting for 3 months. So how are you gonna have any communications? So I think what you said is an excellent idea.
I will send you emails. I won't send you a ton of emails. You'll get one, and it'll be quick to read through. And
That'd be fine.
okay.
Thank you.
In the April 7th minutes, I'm quoted as asking about the proposal for the code update. That's something that we had requested, the town council had requested, and Kevin was working on the RFPs. So can you go to the 5 and 6 tasks?
Going the wrong way.
this one here, number 5, that is what we were working on. That's what Kevin was working on with the RFPs. So this is their proposal for that. The council has pretty much approved that pending an additional appropriation that I have got to work on myself before they can do. But so I just wanted to point out that that was what we requested. It's worded a little bit different in the Unified Development Ordinance. You know, we're just used to calling it the planning code.
In the RFP, that's where we changed it. We decided we wanted to go with the UDO, so that's how we were advertising it.
Yeah.
And how many responses did we get from that?
We received a few, but we had decided because it was services and we didn't really need an RFP, we decided to go with Ron's company because he's already so involved in various things about Ellettsville, I guess.
I think that, I mean, when we set out to do this, I think our intention, we always thought that we would sort of, you know, the comprehensive plan was an input, right? But then we intended that we thought, you know, then we'll marry them, you know, we'll do this work and then we'll kind of hold them up against, you know, side by side and see what makes sense and how do they marry together. I think one thing that, one of the ideas that Ron brought to the table was, why not leverage this work? I mean, we've already, the community, you're gonna have to get that community input. We did that, we got the money, it's paid for. So the thought was leverage it and maybe give you something that would help you move faster. I know there's a sense of urgency. I know you all feel urgency. There's, as Lisa said, people knocking on the door all the time. So that's where the idea came from, was how do we leverage the knowledge? They've gone deep. I mean, his team has gone deep and they, I don't know, I guess we just like working with them. Their values kind of align with our values. They're humble, they're hardworking, they're collaborative. They know us, the work's done. So the thought was, let's not spend any more money than we have to. Let's leverage the work. So that's how that came about. Does that make sense?
One of the goals when we were coming up with this document was to leverage it for grant applications, being familiar with the Main Street way of doing things, and talking about stellar communities. And back, some of you might have participated in going over to Spencer because there was a focus to act more regionally and partner, and especially with Interstate 69, it kind of forces us to think more about looking to the west, and with Bloomington coming this way, where do we have the room to grow? And being able to partner with Steinsville and Spencer is very important. And they're going to offer funding for that. That's you know, every few years there'll be a topic that's a focus, and now the buzzword is regional focus. And so we have a good rapport, possibly partnering together with the Spencer community. It helps us both. And one of the reasons why we chose Ron's group too is because the company that's doing consulting work with Spencer was one of the ones that put in their hat to work with us, and we thought it could work to our advantage of having a different firm. So we have firm A working with Ellettsville, firm B working with Spencer, and then they can kind of maybe collaborate so we can get the best of ideas to help our communities grow in the future. And it really was not just to get us a vision document, but a partner that could work with us for many years, like what we're seeing with Huntingburg and down in Evansville and across the Ohio River with Louisville. The Taylor Seafair Williams Design Group, Ron's company, they have been working with them for many years and I'm very excited. And I thought, if they can deal with issues like I-69 and Ohio River, that's a lot bigger than Jackson Creek. I think we're gonna do okay.
Well,
No pressure, Ron.
I think some of the misunderstanding or feeling that the Plan Commission members might have is the fact that we were working with Kevin and had asked for that, you know, those RFPs to go out. And then I understand the concept. They were already so into our community. Why start from scratch when you're halfway there? But then we kind of didn't get included in any of that
process. We didn't know that the RFPs weren't going to be, you know, graded, and you got to do that with 21 companies. We didn't get that choice, so not that the choice is bad, I'm
Kevin
just
did,
saying
though.
that.
Kevin was involved in the process.
Right.
He was involved in the hiring. He went through the RFP process for this project.
Yes, I'm
I don't know if we're
saying-
mixing two projects.
Yeah,
so-
you had your project at the
Okay.
beginning, and we had a project we were working on too. And then the
Okay.
decision was made without our participation.
Which-
That's what I'm,
which
the
decision?
decision for the Unified Development Plan.
Okay, so,
But that hasn't,
yeah, so I think that, and my understanding of that is, when we looked at the priorities and we looked at the funding that the town had available to start moving with things, forward with some of these efforts, we looked at what those priorities were, and we provided the proposal and the fee estimates and things like that for the town to review. I think it had to do with funding availability and sort of the urgency to try to get the code redevelopment going, because it's such a long process. And I think that the town was acting in their role as the fiduciary agent and not as the planning overseer. So I think it was strictly contractual. I don't want to put words in others' mouths, but I think that it wasn't an attempt to sort of usurp the plan commission. It was an attempt to, okay, well, let's start to get a process going, and this is the quickest path and the most efficient path for us to move that process forward with that.
Well, and you know, I have been on the Plan Commission for a while, and we did do some, when I-69 was coming in, we were getting a grant, and we did some RFPs for park plans and things, and those RFPs were all, you know, distributed among us, and they were graded. Not every member of the Plan Commission was an active grader, but there was several, and the information was dispersed to us. And so, you know, we just didn't get any of that. We asked for something, and then we didn't get to participate in any part of that. The decision was made before we even got to look at the plan, or,
Can I interject something? I think.
now this is not Envision. Please do not confuse the two. I'm saying, you have your Envision plan. I like it. It's nice. You did a great job, a lot of community effort. Thank you. I'm just saying that we were working too, independent from you, to get our code updated so our zoning ordinances were easier to understand. This was before we knew about the Envision plan or what it was going to do. We knew you were working with our comprehensive plan, which we were all part of. And so then we thought these RFPs were going to go out. We would come back with proposals. We would all get to see them, and then a decision would be made. And that process was all removed. No fault of yours. I'm just saying that because of that, that could be some of the reason we felt a little left out.
Well, if I may say that when we had, our scope was so broad, and it's like taking a wide net to try to get all the ideas coming in. It was kind of a coincidence that as this was getting filtered out, that the Plan Commission, you know, the updating of the documents came to the top of our list about the same time that you were working independently, coming up with your solution, and then looking at those two options, which one is the best one to go with the information at that given time. I think that's why the decision was made by the town council to move forward with Ron's group, because they were already here and with the proven track record and the knowledge. And
Well, I can see how it happened, but I was just trying to give you some insight so you understood how some of us might feel.
Sure. And it does, I take away from that too, is that this is a very important task. You were saying it needed to be done, and from our efforts, which is not just planning concerns, but a lot of different things, it was coming up as a top priority. So I'm glad that there is a solution, and hopefully you'll see as what we've seen so far as that Ron's firm is a good one to work with. And they're not going to be doing all of the work that needs to be done. If it makes sense and the town council wants, that their company might help develop RFPs to hire another firm. You know, it's not like Ron's company's got the whole bag of tricks to play for Ellettsville. It's going to be which companies are the best for the job. And so far, right now, we see that Ron's company, because of the expertise they've gained in working with us intimately over the last year, are in a good position to help us move forward.
So Sandy, I guess my question back to you would be, are you just wanting us to hear that feedback and understand, or are you wanting us to try to figure out what happened?
No, I don't want you to figure out what happened.
You just want us to hear,
That's
I get
why
it.
some of the, I think that could be why some of this,
Yeah.
you know, things have come up.
yeah, there was definitely some activities happening that didn't get aligned.
Yeah,
I
and
can
you throw
definitely see
in
that.
losing
Yeah.
our planner in the middle
Yeah,
of it,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
us being, not having
Yeah.
meetings. He left before those RFPs
Yeah.
were published or out.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a
And then
lot
we're
of,
moving along, and
Yeah.
that has stopped, and so
a lot of things
yeah.
fed into that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't have any complaints with anything that's going on. I was just trying to say, that might be some of the reason.
I understand. So I guess, you know, David said it well, like, can we move forward together? That's our intent. We want you to be able to leverage what we've done. But we hear you. There was definitely some things that weren't aligned, and there was some communication misses.
Yeah, and there's not one.
And no bad intent on our side, no
No.
bad intent on your side. We just need to be able to go forward together as a community. Yeah.
I was just trying to give you a little insight from my point of view.
Yeah, understood.
So,
Understood.
given with the decision that's been made, do you see now how we can move forward? Like Denise working with Ron Taylor's group, you've mentioned a couple things this evening. Are you feeling more comfortable with what the town council's decision is? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I am.
I let him ride around in the planning vehicles.
And I think
It's not everybody gets to do that, so.
Wow.
as it moves along, we will become more involved.
Yes.
Yes.
But at the onset, it, you know,
Yeah.
So where that stands is there's a draft task order that the town council has reviewed. And so, not to put Pamela and Dan on the spot, you should have copies of those. And if you need additional copies, you can sort of take a look. It outlines what the steps are, but there are, I think that there are specific steps that are called out for presentations to you, but there's a lot of other steps in there that involve you being involved with sort of figuring out what some of those code items are going to need to be. So,
Before we keep moving on, I got one question for Darla. And I'm sure this is not an issue, or you would have already said something about it, but since we did initiate the RFPs and we did receive them, is there anything legal that needs to be done, saying we accepted one already, or do we have to give the other people who submitted?
Denise, I believe, has already informed them that we made a selection, and so
Okay.
she's canceled the RFPs.
All right. I'm sure it was a non-issue, but I had to ask, so.
Okay, I think we have discussed that issue to death, maybe?
oh, I think this was a good meeting and it was very informative. I really appreciated this. I've sat through a couple of them and I think I got more out of this one than any. So I appreciate your efforts to help us understand and everybody's efforts to get along.
And thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Okay, we have a couple of items, quick items left on our agenda. Planning Department update.
I don't have any updates.
Okay, our next meeting is October 6th of 2022. Do you think we'll have any business then, or?
I've not been contacted about anything, maybe a possible annexation, but they're still kind of iffy, so, and stuff else.
Okay.
But other than that, there's nothing.
Okay, privilege of the floor. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to something that wasn't already discussed on our agenda? You sure? Way back there in the back?
Yeah. I was hoping he couldn't hear us back there.
Plan Commission comments.
I'd like to make a comment real quick. And I kind of want to see how the rest of the commissioners feel on this. On planning meeting updates, I would really like to see meetings held every month, even if there is no business, just for us to get the time to meet, discuss things. If something comes up the last minute, something like that, because I know we like to cancel them at least a week or so in advance. I feel I would rather come here even if it's a 10-minute meeting. So I don't know how the rest of you feel on that, but
I thought we agreed at the last meeting that we weren't gonna skip any more meetings, but maybe I was
You
asleep.
had instructed them that if they wanted to talk about something in a meeting, they were to email it to me so I could put it on the agenda.
But I thought, at one of the meetings, I thought we discussed that we should probably meet anyway, even if we didn't have any business. But
It was discussed at the last meeting, but I don't know if we
There
voted or
wasn't a
make a
decision.
yeah, it wasn't a vote. I just thought we kind of had a consensus that we should meet. But
so maybe we should do a formal vote. I mean, how do you guys down there feel? Sandy?
I'm okay to meet.
Pat? Sure. Pam? Do we need to vote on it, or?
I don't think you need to have a formal vote. Either you've got a consensus on that, so.
Okay. Denise, I'm sorry. I know sometimes you look forward to a night off, but they'll be quick and painless, and David will bring the pizza every meeting. We earn that pay rate, that's what happens. I'm sorry, Pat, I didn't hear you.
I said, that's that pay rate. Now she's on the,
Oh,
on the top.
okay, well, that seems to be everything on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
We don't need to anymore.
Oh,
I found out the president,
okay, well, I'm adjourning.
yes.